Emotional reunion. Billy Mangosimo breaks down after discovering he has twins with his ex-wife. He offered her diamonds. She thought it was just a game, but when she wore the ring, he made her his wife for a single day, just to get his Then she vanished. Now, years later, she returned, but this time she's not playing pretend. New York City. The skyline shimmered with ambition, and in a private suite on the 63rd floor of the Whitestone Tower, ambition wore a tuxedo. Julian Blake stood with his back to the mirror, adjusting the platinum cufflinks that bore his family's crest. A storm of paparazzi flashes crackled outside, far below, but in here, silence. Cold, elegant silence, the kind only the rich can afford. He wasn't nervous. Julian Blake didn't do nervous. He orchestrated board takeovers, rewrote million-dollar contracts over breakfast, and walked away from anything that threatened his emotional control. Except her. Julian glanced toward the small velvet box on the glass table. Inside was a ring. Not the one he'd used to propose to his fiancée last year. That relationship had dissolved with polite headlines and a mutual PR statement. No, this ring was older. It was the one he gave to her. Her name was Emily Hart. A waitress. A linguistics major who never finished school. She smelled like vanilla and ambition, and the first time she told him no, he'd laughed. No one said no to Julian Blake, but she had. She said it with a fierce glare and trembling hands when he offered her $5,000 to pretend to be his bride for one night. And somehow that one night changed everything. Julian walked to the window, staring out at the Empire skyline. His father had been dying. The will was clear. No inheritance unless Julian married by midnight on his birthday. And not just anyone. A woman of substance, loyalty, and discretion, as per his father's ridiculous clause. Julian's real fiancée had walked out months before. He had 6 hours to find a wife. That's when Emily, drenched from the rain, had spilled coffee on his custom Tom Ford suit. He remembered the look in her eyes. Defiance mixed with desperation. She needed the money. He needed a bride. He'd offered her $50,000. 0 cents for one day. No strings. Just paperwork, photos, dinner with his father. And a kiss. He wore the ring. She said, "I do." Then she disappeared before sunrise. And now, 5 years later, she had walked back into his life. In the last place he expected, his company's international language department, applying as a junior translator, wearing the same ring, holding the hand of a little girl, with his eyes. Julian hadn't moved from the window in 15 minutes. The past wasn't just catching up, it was storming in like a hurricane. 6 years earlier, one night in Manhattan, Emily Hart had never been inside a suite like this. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a bathtub with champagne chilling beside it, and a view of Manhattan that could silence even the most cynical heart. But Emily wasn't here to be silenced. She was here because her mother's surgery had been denied by Medicaid, and the man in the black suit had offered her a lifeline. One night, one lie, one contract. A fake marriage in exchange for the money that could save her mother's life. "I need a wife before midnight," Julian had said. His voice was low, dangerous, like he wasn't asking, he was deciding. Emily had almost said no. Then she saw the legal paperwork, the emergency medical estimate for $47,900, 0 cents, and his signature on a check for $50,000, 0 cents. No vows, no forever. Just one night. And yet something about the way he looked at her made her heart ache, like he saw through her borrowed dress and rain-streaked cheeks. They were married at 11:56 p.m. in a penthouse ballroom filled with corporate witnesses and flashing cameras. By morning he was gone. And so was she. Present-day Whitestone Enterprises HQ. Emily's heels clicked against the marble floor as she entered the lobby. Her resume trembled in her hands, but her heart was steady. This was the last place she ever wanted to be. It was the only place that could help her now. But his heart, the HR assistant approached, eyes kind but curious. "You're scheduled for your final interview with the CEO at 10:15. Emily nodded. "I'm ready." But she wasn't. Because the CEO was Julian Blake. and he hadn't seen her face since the night they said "I do." The elevator doors slid open, and as Emily stepped in, her daughter's voice echoed in her memory. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" Emily had answered with a soft kiss and a whispered promise. "He's out there, baby, but he doesn't know you exist. Until now." Julian sat behind the glass desk when she entered. His expression didn't change at first. He looked up, blinked, returned to the folder in front of him. His heart, but his hand tightened around the pen until it cracked. Emily sat down, the same poise, the same determination, but everything else had changed. Her shoulders were broader now, not physically but emotionally. She had the presence of a woman who had survived far more than she let on. Julian leaned forward, voice tight. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "Tell me why you're here." Emily swallowed. "To work," she replied. "For my daughter." The word hit him like a gut punch. Julian leaned back slowly. "I'm sorry, you're what?" "My daughter," she said calmly. "She's 4. Her name is Lily." Silence. Julian's entire body went still. 4. The math added up. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. The one he gave her. The ring still inside. "I never pawned it," she whispered. He slid it across the table. He didn't touch it. "Just start." "You used me," he finally said, took the money and disappeared. "I saved my mother's life," she said, eyes glistening. "And then I raised our daughter alone." The weight of it landed between them like thunder. Julian looked down at the ring, then at her, then past her, to the glass window, where Manhattan glowed like a kingdom he no longer knew how to rule. "Get out," we whispered. Emily stood spine straight. "You asked for 5 minutes, I gave you 4. But if you change your mind," she paused. "I'm not running this time." He turned, walked to the door, and then paused. "She has your eyes," Emily said softly, "and your temper." The door closed behind her. And Julian Blake, billionaire, boardroom tyrant, and self-proclaimed master of control, realized he had just lost the one thing he thought he never needed. Until now. Chapter 1. The Girl in the Coffee Shop. 6 years before Julian Blake saw her again. Before the velvet ring box and the courtroom showdown. Before the little girl with his eyes called him sir instead of dad. There was just a coffee shop and a girl who spilled scalding espresso down his $1,000 suit. It was 2:22 a.m., and Julian was already behind schedule. The Whitestone Holdings board meeting had gone long. His driver was circling in the rain, and now the corner cafe near Madison and 58th was moving slower than the SEC. The line wrapped past the pastry case, and the air smelled like burnt hazelnut and desperation. He hated this place. But his father used to come here every Friday morning. Something about staying connected to the people, which Julian always thought was nonsense. Still, after his father's death 2 weeks ago, Julian found himself craving the ritual. Or maybe the ghost of one. He checked his Rolex, tapped his phone, and that's when it happened. A woman, rushed past him carrying a tray full of drinks. She was small, quick, and flustered. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her shoes squeaked against the wet tile. He didn't see him. But he saw her, right before the coffee hit his chest. "Damn it!" Julian barked, flinching backward as the heat spread through his shirt. Coffee soaked his tie, his tailored suit jacket, and, most devastatingly, his patience. The woman froze. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Julian stared at her. This was a clumsy barista. She was wearing jeans. A bookstore staff badge. She looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. But her eyes, God, her eyes. Wide blue like a storm just before it broke. He grabbed napkins from the counter, frantically patting his chest. "I didn't see you. You were just standing there like a damn statue." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I didn't mean damn, I mean... You're obviously not a statue. You're a man. A very wet man. I'm so... Just... Don't sue me, okay?" He sounded like she might cry. But she didn't. She kept pressing napkins to his lapel, her fingers shaking. Julie got her wrist. He looked up. And the world saw me. He didn't know her name, but suddenly the air felt different, thicker, charged. "I'm not going to sue you," he said calmly. He blinked. "I have bigger problems." "Like dry cleaning? Like finding a wife?" He stared at him. "I'm sorry, guy." Julian released her hand. "Forget it." No, back up. Did you just say wife?" He looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't beautiful in the way Manhattan usually required, not manicured or polished or frozen, but she was radiant in a way money couldn't buy. Real, tired, fierce. And standing in front of him with coffee on her shirt and sass in her spine. He liked her instantly. "I need a wife," he said again, eyes locked on hers. "You've clearly suffered head trauma." "My father passed 2 weeks ago," he explained. "His estate has a condition. I have until midnight tonight to marry." He blinked. "You're serious?" "I'm sorry about your dad," she said quietly. He nodded. "That part still hurt." "And you want to marry a stranger?" "Nah, well, I want to hire one." She recoiled. "Excuse me?" "Contract," he said. 12 hours. Just a performance. 1 dinner, 1 photo op, 1 signature. Then we part ways. $50,000. He gawped. 50. Bajos, she echoed. He nodded. Cash. Tax-free. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then opened again. Why me? Julian shrugged. You're anonymous. Convincing. And judging by your bookstore badge and the circles under your eyes, you need the money. Her expression hardened. Wow. You really know how to make a girl feel special. I don't have time to sugarcoat things, he said. I need someone I won't fall in love with. He laughed, loud, bitter. Well, I'm definitely your girl. There was. Then she crossed her arms. And what happens if I say yes? Old Julian tilted his head. You get a dress, a driver, a ring, dinner with my lawyer, a marriage license filed by midnight. You go home richer, I get my inheritance. You get your life back. He hesitated. He pulled out a black leather folder. Inside, the check. 50,000, he said. Right now. Walk away whenever you want. But once you say yes, we're married by midnight. He stared at it. Tears welled in her eyes. My mother needs a surgery, she whispered. Insurance won't cover it. But Julian nodded once. So she took the check. Okay, she said. I'll be your one. Later that night, the penthouse. The dress fit perfectly. Emily stood in front of the mirror, barely breathing. The black satin gown hugged her curves, modest yet elegant. A stylist had done her makeup, soft and understated. Her hair fell in smooth waves. She looked like someone who belonged in his world. But she didn't. Julian stood beside her, Tuck's immaculate jaw clenched. Ready? He asked. No, she said honestly, but let's do it anyway. They stepped into the elevator, silence stretching between them. At the ballroom, flashbulbs lit the Mick, Julian Blake and Mick Zimmerly Blake. The word hit her like a wave. Mrs. Blake. They took hands to the cameras. But when their fingers touched, something strange happened. His thumb grazed hers, slow, deliberate. And for a second it didn't feel like pretend. Hours later, the end of the beginning. They sat on the rooftop, just the two of them, a bottle of champagne between them, untouched. Emily shivered. Julian shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. Don't read into it, he muttered. He wouldn't dare. He smirked. He looked up at him, her voice quiet. Or didn't your fiancé do this? He stiffened. I said I was too emotionally unavailable. He wasn't wrong. He turned toward her. You believe in love, Emily? He blinked. I believe in He studied her, something unreadable in his expression. Then he reached into his pocket. The ring, the real one. He slid it onto her finger. For the camera, she said. He nodded even as her pulse fluttered. They stayed there in silence, New York glittering below them. Neither of them knew it then, but that was the moment they stopped pretending and started something they could never undo. Chapter 2: Help and Hesitation. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. Emily stood outside her apartment, soaked to the skin, her grocery bag torn and cans rolling across the sidewalk. Her heels, the ones the stylist insisted she keep as a souvenir, were completely inappropriate for Brooklyn's cracked sidewalks, but they were the only shoes she owned that weren't falling apart. He bent down to pick up a can of soup and blinked back, the sting in his eyes, not from the wind, not from the rain, but from reality catching up. 24 hours ago, she had stood in a penthouse as the bride of Julian Blake. Now she was here, back in her tiny fourth-floor walk-up, with $50,000, 0 cents in her bank account, and no idea who she was anymore. A car pulled up to the curb, black, expensive. Of course. Emily, called. She turned, instantly recognizing the deep, commanding tone. Julian. He hadn't expected to see him again. The plan was done, the contract fulfilled, the lie. "What are you doing here?" she asked, clutching the can to her chest like it could shield her from him. He got out of the car, holding an umbrella, not over himself, but over her. His shirt was already wet. "I came to return this." He held up a small velvet box. "The ring." Emily froze. "You thought I left it at the penthouse." "You did," he said, "but I figured you might want to keep it. A memento." She narrowed her eyes. A memento of what? A lie? A very well-compensated fairy tale? His jaw clenched. "A moment. One we both lived. Don't pretend it didn't mean something." Emily's breath caught. He looked at her like she was a riddle he couldn't solve, and didn't want to stop trying. "Julian, the deal is over. You got your inheritance. I got my mother's surgery. We're good." He nodded slowly, but something shifted in his eyes. I just thought. He hesitated, an unfamiliar vulnerability creeping into his voice. "I thought maybe you needed help." That word, help, stung more than she expected. "I don't need your help," she snapped. "I've always figured it out." "You can see that," he said quietly, glancing at her torn grocery bag, the rain-soaked clothes. "But Emily, you shouldn't have to." There was a silence between them. "Abby, you're turning." She wanted to hate him for showing up here, for making her feel seen when all she wanted was to disappear. But more than anything, she wanted to believe him. "And fine," she said again. "Really?" He looked unconvinced. He stepped back, one foot already on the building's steps. "Thank you for the—" "Keep it," he said, "or pawn it, I don't care. But don't pretend I didn't see you." Emily turned and walked away. He didn't look back. But the ring stayed in her hand. Later that night, the wind. Emily sat at the table, staring at the ring. He hated how beautiful it was. Not because of the diamonds, though they were flawless, but because of what it had represented, even for just one night. Those ability. The idea that she could be someone else. Not Emily Hart, part-time bookstore clerk and full-time caretaker, but Emily Blake, strong, graceful, adored, seen. He sighed and slipped the ring back into its box. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting her resume. If she was going to change her life, she'd do it on her own. 1 week later, Whitestone Tower. Julian's office overlooked Midtown like a king surveying his kingdom, but lately the kingdom didn't feel so secure. "Sir George," his assistant said, stepping into the office, "you asked for a list of new hires for the translation team. There's one applicant you should look at personally." Julian didn't glance up from his desk. "Why would I?" George handed over a resume. Julian took it absently, then stopped cold. "Emily Hope." His fingers tightened around the paper. "When was this submitted?" 3 days ago. She interviewed yesterday. Impressed the panel. Background checks clean, fluency in Mandarin and French. We were going to move her to onboarding." Julian said nothing for a long moment. She doesn't know this is your company, George said. Should I inform her? No. George raised an eyebrow. Sir. Julian stood, walked to the window. He remembered her standing there in that ballroom. A stranger, yet somehow already inside his skin. He remembered her eyes when she'd said goodbye. No, he repeated. Don't tell her. George nodded. Would you like me to withdraw the offer? Julian turned around. Absolutely not. Let her walk through the front doors of his world again. On her own terms. This time, he wouldn't pay her to stay. He'd have to convince her. Emily's first day at Whitestone Enterprises. The building was everything she expected. Cold, glassy, terrifying. Emily stood in the HR lobby in her best thrift store blazer, gripping a tote bag with her notebook and a single pen. The other new hires looked like they'd stepped out of Fashion Week. He felt the sting of inadequacy creep up her spine, until she remembered her daughter's face this morning. You've got this, Mommy, Lily had whispered. Emily took a deep breath. I understood. The onboarding session went smoothly. The department head smiled. You'll be working under the CEO's executive interpreter team. A lot of international communication. We've got major Chinese clients lined up this quarter. Emily's heart skipped. Chinese clients? Wait, what is the CEO? The woman laughed. You'll meet him soon enough. Let's just say he's brilliant. And terrifying. Emily forced a smile. Please don't let it be him. 2 days later, the executive floor. Julian leaned against the glass wall outside the translation department. He hadn't spoken to her since the day he brought back the ring. He could have walked in, said something casual. But he didn't want casual. He wanted to know what brought her here, what she wanted, who she'd become. A voice interrupted his thoughts. She's here again, sir, George said. Julian nodded. I'm aware. She's good, full and sufficient. Everyone likes her. Julian didn't respond. George hesitated. Do you want me to continue shielding your identity? Julian finally turned. No, he said. Bring her to my office. George blinked. Now? 5 minutes later. Emily entered the top floor with shaking hands. The receptionist pointed her down the long hallway. Mr. Blake is expecting you. Mr. Blake. It couldn't be. But as the doors opened, she saw him. Julian. Behind a glass desk, backlit by the city skyline. The same man who'd made her his bride for one day. And maybe something else forever. He stood, slowly. Emily Hott, he said, softly. He swallowed. Yes. She nodded slowly. You knew, the whole time. I did. She stared at him, fury and fear battling in her chest. Julian walked around the desk, his voice quiet. Because I wanted to see if you'd walk in without me paying you. Emily's heart thudded in her chest. Well, she said, here I am. And that was the moment Julian Blake realized. He wasn't his pretend wife anymore. But she was his equal. And she was back, for real this time. Chapter 3. Hope and First Obstacle. Emily had always believed in earning her place. So she arrived early. The sun hadn't yet burned off the morning fog hovering over Midtown when she stepped into the mirrored lobby of Whitestone Enterprises. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor, the sound swallowed by glass and silence. No one looked twice at her. She preferred it that way. It was easier to stay invisible in a company like this, a skyscraper filled with whispers, ambition, and too many secrets. And one of them was hers. Or maybe two. She stood to the elevator and pressed 58. The executive floor. Julian hadn't spoken to her since that strange, charged meeting in his office 2 days ago. He hadn't fired her, hadn't promoted her, just stared at her like he was seeing a ghost, and maybe he was. Because the woman who once wore his ring was long gone. Now she was just Emily Hart, junior interpreter, single mom, fighter. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, and as she stepped out, she caught her reflection in the wall of windows. Sharp blazer, pressed slacks, nerves tucked beneath lipstick. He looked ready. He hoped she was. "Good morning," a voice called from down the corridor. Emily turned. It was George, the COO and Julian's personal gatekeeper. Tall. "Mr. Blake asked that you join the Mandarin delegation debrief at 9 o'clock. Conference room A," he said, handing her a folder. "He's requested your presence." "Requested," Emily repeated, keeping her voice even. George didn't blink. "You're impressive, Miss Hart, and Mr. Blake values fluency." "Right. That's why he wanted her there. Not because she was the girl who'd once kissed him in a fake wedding dress. No, because her daughter had his eyes. You're to that business." He nodded. "I'll be there." The conference room A. Emily sat near the end of the long oak table, her notes open, her pen ready. Julian hadn't arrived yet, but the tension was already present. The Lianglong delegation had flown in from Beijing. The merger deal was valued at $3.2 billion, 0 cents. And everything depended on perfect translations, 0 cultural missteps, and a CEO who didn't self-destruct. Emily translated quietly as the room filled with greetings, laughter, and polite posturing. She slipped into the rhythm of Mandarin, the familiar flow calming her nerves. Then the door opened. Julian entered, and suddenly her heart forgot how to beat. He was in a navy suit today, no tie, slightly unshaven, and infuriatingly, devastatingly calm. His eyes swept the room, then landed on her. But only for a second. He took the head of the table. "Let's begin," he said. The room fell silent. Midway through the meeting, things turned tense. A delegate from Lianglong, Mr. Zhao, frowned and tapped his document. "We were told the R&D transfer would be nondescript," he said in Mandarin. Julian glanced at Emily for translation. He delivered it calmly. Julian's jaw tightened. "It was not the agreement," he said. Emily translated back. Mr. Zhao's expression grew cold. Emily could feel the shift in the room, like standing on thin ice. He glanced down at the papers. The English version said exclusive use. The Mandarin version, however, had a different character, one that implied shared access. Her blood went cold. Mistranslation. Or sabotage. Either way, it was going to... "Is that correct?" he asked in English. Emily nodded once. "There's a discrepancy. The Mandarin phrasing implies shared intellectual rights." "Fix it," Julian snapped. "I can't rewrite signed documents in the middle of a meeting," she said, keeping her voice calm. "But I can explain the cultural misinterpretation and offer a clarification proposal." Julian stared at her. The room waited. Emily took a deep breath, turned to the delegates, and began. 20 minutes later, disaster was averted. The Lianglong team left with polite smiles and tighter conditions. The merger wasn't dead, but it was wounded. When the room cleared, Emily gathered her notes quickly, her hands shaking just slightly. He was almost at the door when she heard him. "Emily." He stood by the window, hands in his pockets. "You caught that," he said. "I was doing my job," she replied. Julian turned. "No," he said softly. "You saved my company $15 million. He didn't respond. He took a step closer. "I owe you." "You don't," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We're even, remember?" He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. "You're wrong." Her breath caught. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he said, "and I keep making them, but bringing you back into this building, that wasn't one of them." Emily blinked back, the emotion pressing behind her eyes. "And got treated like one." Julian's mouth opened slightly, then closed. He turned and walked out. This time, he didn't stop her. Mel's apartment. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the dishwasher and Lily's breathing from the bedroom. Emily sat on the couch, the folder of merger documents open in front of her, but her mind somewhere else. Julian's words, "You've made a lot of mistakes." She knew what that meant. He wasn't just talking about contracts or billion-dollar blunders. He meant her, and Lily. But she couldn't afford to believe in the sincerity of a man like Julian Blake, not when her daughter's safety depended on stability, not when one mistake could unravel the life she'd built from nothing. Still, when she looked across the table at the folder with the Whitestone logo, she didn't feel like a fraud anymore. He felt like someone who deserved to be in that room. He earned her place. The next morning, Emily stepped into the executive floor again, this time with less hesitation. But her hope was short-lived. Because when she opened her office inbox, the first email subject line read, "Mercury error. Translator under..." Emily clicked it. Apparently someone had reported her linguistic oversight to the board. Accused her of incompetence. Julian hadn't defended her, at least not publicly. He sat in stunned silence. So this was it, the obstacle, the moment when the cracks showed, when her name wasn't just a resume anymore but a target. When her past became ammunition. He stood and squared. He wasn't going to let this be the end. Not after everything. Again flushed down Julian's private office. George looked up as Julian burst through the doors. "Who filed the translator complaint?" Julian demanded. George blinked. "The CFO, worried about investor confidence. He's recommending a replacement." Julian swore under his breath. "This wasn't her fault," he said. "The documents were switched. Someone planted a mistranslation." George arched an eyebrow. "Sabotage." Julian's jaw tightened. "Or revenge? From who?" He didn't know, but he was going to find out. Because if anyone thought they could take Emily Hart down while working for him, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Chapter 4. The Doubt Between the Applause. The applause was deafening. Emily stood center stage, spotlights casting a warm glow on her face, her heartbeat drumming louder than the crowd's approval. Her voice had just delivered the final line of her presentation, a passionate defense of integrating human-centered sustainability into Whitestone Enterprises' international expansion. But as the crowd rose to their feet, her eyes found only one person. Julian Blake. In the front row. Upping closely, deliberately, his jaw tight, not smiling, just watching. Their gazes met for a second too long. Then it broke. The moment, the connection. And in its place, a familiar chill. She stepped down from the stage into a wave of well-wishes. Executives, investors, media personnel asking for interviews. But all she could feel was the growing knot in her stomach. Julian hadn't said a word since the incident in the boardroom. Since she'd caught the mistranslation that nearly cost the company $15 million. 0 cents. Since she'd saved him. And he hadn't thanked her. Not once. Not in private, not in front of the team, not even in a look. He was back in the shadows, where women like her belonged in his world. The gala relataya. The reception was in full swing. Crystal glasses clinked. Deals were quietly brokered in corners. Waiters floated between silk and satin gowns. Emily leaned against the edge of the ballroom, nursing a sparkling water, her heels already biting into her skin. She'd changed into a deep emerald dress, a gift from Julian's stylist team, the same one who once dressed her for a single night of marriage. Beautiful and brilliant, quite the combination. Emily turned at the voice. Stella Whitmore, Julian's former fiancée. She was all polished elegance and condescending charm, her ice-blonde hair swept into a knot that probably cost more than Emily's rent. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry we met?" Emily asked, polite but cool. "We haven't," Stella replied, swirling her wine. "But I've certainly heard a lot about you, the mysterious interpreter with a flair for drama." Emily's fingers tensed around her glass. "I'm just doing my job." "Of course," Stella said sweetly, "though some might say you're doing more than that. I mean, the presentation, the praise, the way Julian looks at you." She leaned in. "He never looked at me like that, not even when I said yes." Emily took a breath. Maybe he never looked at you because he was too busy looking in the mirror. Stella's eyes flashed. You're clever, but let me offer you some advice. Julian Blake only loves one thing: control. And the moment you threaten that, even accidentally, he'll cut you loose faster than you can say prenup. Emily didn't flinch. Is that what happened to you? There was a flicker in Stella's expression, pain masked quickly by disdain. Enjoy the spotlight, sweetheart. It doesn't last. He walked away, heels clicking like gunshots. Emily stood there for a moment, the lights suddenly too bright, the music too loud. Her head spun, not from Stella's venom but from the sliver of truth buried inside it. Julian hadn't spoken to her since the boardroom win. He hadn't acknowledged her efforts. Was he just waiting to reclaim control? Had this all been conveyed to Julian's private office the next morning? Why didn't you tell the room it was my correction? Emily's voice cut through the air like a blade. Julian looked up from the report he was reviewing, startled but unreadable. He presented the proposal. That was the win, he said evenly. She took a step closer, barely containing her hurt. That mistake would have cost us everything, Julian, and you let the board believe it was your strategic correction. His silence answered for him. Emily folded her arms, biting back emotion. You promised to treat me like a partner. Instead, you let me stand behind you. Julian finally stood. This company has optics, Emily. A junior interpreter doesn't what? She snapped. Doesn't deserve credit? Or does she just remind you too much of the girl you married for one night and forgot by morning? That landed. Julian's jaw tensed, his eyes darkening. Don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything, she said quietly. I'm just realizing that maybe Stella was right. Julian's expression changed, something flickering behind the anger. Regret? Guilt? He told me you love control more than truth. He turned away, fists clenched at his sides. You don't understand what's at stake here. Then explain it to me, she said, because all I see is a man who can praise me behind closed doors, but won't stand beside me in the light. Silence. The kind that burns more than it soothes. I need some space, Julian muttered, grabbing his coat. No, Emily said, her voice cracking. You need courage. Emily's a puppet that... He sat on the floor of his bedroom, files spread out, her daughter Lily's crayon drawing taped to the nightstand beside her. A son, a house, 3 stick figures. A family. He stared at the drawing, heart aching. What was she doing? Chasing praise from a man who only saw her when it benefited him? But there had been moments, real ones. The way he looked at her after she saved the merger, the hand he placed on her back before the presentation, like he needed her there to breathe. It couldn't all be an AC. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. The board approved your proposed revision. Your name will be on the permanent credits. I told them. You were right about everything. I don't want you behind me. I want you beside me. Emily didn't respond. Not yet. The doubt was still there, but so was the hope. And hope, as she'd learned, could be louder than doubt. Chapter 5. In the Fire Together. The crisis hit just after 6 a.m. Emily had barely touched her coffee when the emergency notification flashed on her phone. Julian's voice followed seconds later, curt and low over the phone line. You get to the office. No. By the time she arrived, the Whitestone Tower was already in chaos. Phones rang non-stop. Executives whispered in tight clusters. Legal teams ran between offices like Wall Street on Doomsday. Emily spotted Julian through the glass of the executive boardroom, his back straight, jaw tight, sleeves rolled, pacing like a lion in a cage. It reminded her of the man she married one night without knowing what it would cost her, what it would awaken in him. He entered without knocking. He didn't turn. The Liang Long deal just bled $48 million, 0 cents in projected valuation. Her breath caught. What? They leaked a modified prototype blueprint. An old one, he clarified. Incomplete, but it's enough to cast doubt on our tech lead. Our stock dropped 7% overnight. Emily stepped closer. Do you think they did it on purpose? Julian turned, eyes fierce. They're baiting us, testing how we respond under pressure. She studied him, noting the storm brewing in his gaze. This was no longer business. This was war. She asked quietly. Julian looked at her like he hadn't expected the question, like he didn't know what to do with someone who stood beside him without needing power or praise. I need someone who understands the nuances of Mandarin legal contracts, technical language and international reputation optics, he said. Someone who doesn't flinch. Am your girl? Julian blinked once, and then he smiled. Warm. The executive conference room had been transformed into a command center. Screens lit up with news reports, graphs, and red alerts. The air was thick with tension. Emily stood at the head of the translation team, reviewing every word of the original Mandarin contract with Liang Long's R&D division. She scanned for mistranslations, hidden clauses, anything they could use to claw back their advantage. Julian stood at the opposite end of the room, firing orders, demanding answers. But every few minutes his eyes drifted to her, watching the way she moved, spoke, commanded respect without raising her voice. And every time she caught him staring, he didn't look away. By noon she had something. There's a loophole, she said, walking toward him with a marked document. The leaked blueprint violates Clause 17.4 on confidentiality. If we can prove it was them, the burden shifts to them to fix the damage. Julian scanned the page, his jaw tightening with hope. We can use this. I'll translate and draft the formal notice, she said, but you'll need to speak directly to their CEO. They'll only Julian looked up. Then you're coming with me. 2:30 p.m. virtual conference with Liang Long CEO. The screen flickered. On the other side, the Liang Long executive team appeared, flanked by lawyers and a tight-lipped CEO who wore his silence like armor. Julian opened the call with the usual pleasantries, but it was Emily who cut through the frost with flawless Mandarin. He explained the clause, the breach, the consequences. Calm, firm, unapologetic. The CEO's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He asked. Emily held her ground. The one who knows what you're afraid of. Julian thought a smile. The CEO turned to Julian. With my legacy, Julian said simply. And in that moment Emily's heart did something she wasn't ready for. It scanned her. Later that evening, Julian's office. The CEO had caved, apologized publicly. The stock rebounded 5 points in 2 hours. The board called Julian impressive. Investors said it was the best save they'd seen in 5 years. But none of that mattered to Julian. What mattered was he meant. She sat across from him now, exhaustion in her posture, pride in her eyes. She hadn't changed out of her navy dress since the meeting. Her hair had fallen from its clip. She looked like a hurricane survivor. He stood, walked around the desk. Go Moko for here, he said softly. Emily took it, sipped. We did it? Julian sat beside her on the leather couch. You did that. You trusted me. I never stopped. She looked at him wary. That's not true. He swallowed. No, but I wanted to. There was silence, the kind that crackled with things unsaid. Then Emily whispered, You said something today, to the Liang Long CEO, about trusting me with your legacy. Julian turned to her. I meant it. Their eyes locked, and everything between them, the one-day marriage, the ring, the child he didn't know about, hung in the air like a ghost. I'm not the same girl I was 6 years ago, she whispered. I know. I'm stronger now. I can see that. And more afraid. Julian leaned closer. So am I. Emily looked away. Don't say things you don't mean, Julian. I don't have the strength to survive another lie. He reached for her hand. And for once, she didn't pull away. The elevator, Emily pressed the down button, still holding her blazer in one hand. The elevator chimed. Julian was inside. Of course he was. They stood side by side in silence as the elevator descended. He didn't look at her, not until the doors opened to the lobby and she stepped out into the quiet marble hallway. He called her name. She turned. Emily. Yeah. He hesitated. You've made 1,000 mistakes, he said, but today, working beside you, that wasn't one of them. He nodded slowly, lips trembling. Then she walked away. And Julian watched her go like a man who had just realized what it felt like to lose something before he ever truly had it. Chapter 6. The Secret She Never Meant to Keep. The knock came just past midnight. Emily sat at the kitchen table of her small apartment. Stacks of legal notes and Mandarin drafts spread around her like a scholar preparing for war. Lily slept in the next room, curled beneath a blanket covered in hand-drawn stars. Emily froze mid-sip of lukewarm. He opened the door slowly. Julian. Soaked in rain. Tie gone. Eyes unreadable. What are you doing here? She whispered, heart suddenly in his throat. I need to know, he said. Her blood chilled. No. His jaw tightened, voice barely a whisper. The truth, the whole truth, because something isn't adding up. He stepped back slowly. Julian, I did what you asked, he said. I trusted you. I stood beside you. But there's a storm brewing, Emily. The board is sniffing around your background. Someone leaked your original job application with your legal name. Your stomach dropped. No. No. Not like this. He stepped inside before she could stop him. Emily Hart is Emily Whitman, he said, his voice shaking, and you never told me. Her world tilted. The name, her birth name, felt like a trapdoor cracking open beneath her feet. Why? Julian said. Why would you hide that from me? Emily's hands trembled. She sat down slowly, clutching the edge of the table like she might float away. Because I didn't know who you were when I married you, she said softly, and by the time I did, it was already too late. Julian stared. Start at the beginning. 6 years earlier, 1 month after the wedding. Emily had vanished into anonymity after their contract marriage. But a month later, when the check had been cashed and her mother's surgery successful, she began to wonder who Julian Blake really was. She typed his name into a public registry. She searched his company on her borrowed laptop at the hospital. And that's when she found it. Your mother, Joanna Whitman, former chief financial auditor at Whitestone Holdings. Dismissed abruptly. No formal charges, no payout, no severance. Disappeared from corporate records after a whistleblowing scandal involving Julian's father. Emily had run from the truth her whole life. But that day it caught her. She was the daughter of the woman who nearly brought down Julian Blake's family empire. And now, she was his wife. At least on paper. So she changed her name. Hart was her grandmother's maiden name. She cut her hair. She left town. And she never looked back. Now, Julian paced her kitchen, rain dripping from his coat. You married me under a false identity. I didn't know then, she said, I swear. But when he found out, he stood silent. Emily looked up, her voice trembling. I thought your father destroyed mine. I thought if you knew who I was, who my mother was, you'd hate me. Or worse, you'd take my daughter. The silence between them turned dangerous. What did you say? Emily's breath caught. No. It slipped out. Too late to take back. He stood slowly, voice shaking. Julian. Emily, he said, stepping forward, a ghost in his eyes. Do you have a child? He swallowed. Yes. He staggered backward. His knees hit the chair. You won't, he whispered. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Julian stared, disoriented. And the night we got married. She nodded. He covered his mouth with a trembling hand. Is she the mark? Emily choked on the truth. Her name is Lily. The name hovered in the room like a miracle. Julian dropped into the chair across from her. Broken open. I have... Yes. And you kept her from me. Emily fell to her knees. I was scared. I didn't know who you really were. I didn't know if you'd take her or claim she wasn't yours. I didn't know if your lawyers would crush... Julian didn't respond. He just sat there, his hands trembling. Does she know? He asked after a long time. Emily shook her head. She knows she has a father, but not your name. I told her, someday. He laughed bitterly, wiped his face. Someday? She was the reason I applied to your company. I wanted to build a life worthy of her. Julian turned to her slowly, eyes blazing now. You came to me under a false name. You let me fall in love with you again. You let me say things I've never said to anyone, and the whole time my daughter was sleeping a mile away. Emily nodded, barely able to breathe. You have every right to be angry, she whispered, but please, don't punish her for my mistakes. Julian stood, fire behind his eyes. I don't even know who I'm looking at anymore. He reached the door, then paused. Tell Lily her father's coming back. They left. Later that night, Julian's penthouse. Julian poured 2 fingers of whiskey, but didn't drink. He stood in front of the rain-streaked window, the New York skyline glittering like shattered glass. His hands trembled. He had a 4 years old. Brown hair. Emily's eye. He remembered the night of their fake wedding, the silk of her dress, the shiver in her voice when she said, I do. He had been carrying his child he'd never told him. But even now, in his fury, he couldn't stop thinking about her hands. The way she held his coffee mug. The way she held their life together all alone. And suddenly the anger cracked, revealing something beneath it he hadn't felt in years. A quiet act, not for revenge, but for what he had lost, and what he still wanted. The next morning, outside Emily's apartment, Julian stood on the sidewalk in a navy coat, holding a bouquet of lilies. He didn't know if he was ready. He didn't know if he deserved to be her father. But he knew this much. He wasn't leaving again.
Chapter 7. When the Truth Breaks Us. The lilies wilted before he ever knocked. Julian stood outside Emily's apartment for nearly an hour, bouquet in hand, breath fogging in the cold morning air. He'd practiced the words, I forgive you, I want to know her, I want to know you. Let's start again. But when she finally opened the door, her eyes were already red, and her suitcase was already packed. I didn't think you'd come, she whispered. Julian's jaw clenched. I had to. Amoy looked away. You missed her. He stepped inside. Lily? She's at my neighbor's, she said, voice cracking. I didn't want her to see this. Emily didn't answer. She just picked up the suitcase and moved it to the door. I'm taking her away for a while. Julian froze. Away where? Connecticut. My aunt's. Just some air. You don't get to take her, he said, voice rising. Not now. Not after this. I didn't tell you to protect her, Emily shot back, spinning around. To protect you? You lived in glass towers, Julian. I cleaned floors. I counted pennies. You don't know the world I came from. Julian took a step forward, fury masking heartbreak. You think I wouldn't have taken care of her? Of you? I didn't know that, she cried. You were cold. You married me like I was a transaction. You left before the ink dried. I thought you'd sue for custody if I told you. I would have fought, he said, because she's mine, and because I never got the chance to love her. Emily's lips trembled. You never got the chance to leave her either. The words landed like a slap. Julian stepped back. That's not fair. No, she whispered, but it's true. That night, Emily's aunt's house, Ridgefield, Connecticut. The farmhouse sat nestled between fields and woods, far from the skyline, far from everything that hurt. Emily tucked Lily into bed with shaking hands, brushing a curl off her daughter's cheek. Will Daddy be at school pickup tomorrow? Lily asked sleepily. Emily froze. She had never called him that. Not once. Tomorrow, baby, she whispered. Daddy needs some time. Lily frowned. Did I do something wrong? Emily kissed her forehead. No, honey, you did everything right. But in her chest, her heart shattered into pieces she wasn't sure she could ever glue back together. Meanwhile, in Julian's penthouse, the storm rolled in just past midnight. Julian sat alone in the penthouse, the television off, the fire dimmed, the lilies dying on the counter. Her words echoed in his head. She never got the chance to leave her either. She didn't trust him, even now, even after everything. He opened his laptop, pulling up the original contract, the one from 6 years ago. The signature that made her his wife for one night. His name beside hers. Julian Marcus Blake. Emily Charlotte Whitman. The legal proof of a lie, of a truth, of something neither of them understood at the time. A single line at the bottom caught his eye. Clause 13b. Should a child be conceived during the course of this union, custody and legal guardianship shall be equally shared pending court review. He closed the screen. They weren't married anymore. But she had been his wife. And their daughter was real. 3 days later, the law offices of Whitmore and Dane. I want to file for legal custody, Julian said. The attorney blinked. Full custody? Julian hesitated. No, not full. He exhaled. But I want to be on record. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want visitation. Rights. Everything I should have from day one. And the mother? She's scared, Julian said quietly, and angry. But she's not the enemy. Mr. Blake, you're a billionaire CEO. This case would be very easy to win. Julian stood. That's exactly why I won't fight it like one. Later that day, Emily's aunt's house. The letter arrived by courier. Emily unfolded the neatly typed document with trembling fingers. I am not here to punish you. I am not here to take her. I am only here to claim what I should have always had, my place in her life. Please don't shut me out. Not again. Julian. Attached was a voluntary custody proposal. Equal time, mediation, no court threats, no media exposure, just fatherhood. Emily cried into the pages until they blurred. 2 weeks later, neutral meeting spot, Midtown Manhattan. They met at a sunlit park cafe, halfway between lawyers and memories. Julian wore no suit, just a sweater and jeans. Emily came alone. He stood when she arrived. She didn't smile. I read the letter, she said. I meant every word. Emily nodded, hands in her coat pockets. She keeps drawing pictures of you, even though she's only seen you once. Julian swallowed. I'd like to change that. They sat. I didn't tell you everything, Emily said softly. It wasn't just fear, it was shame. I didn't want to be a woman who got pregnant in a one-night marriage with a man who forgot her name. I never forgot you, he said. I tried to, God, I tried. But I still dream about that night. Emily's eyes shimmered. I wish we'd had a real chance. Maybe we still do. She looked away. Julian nodded. I can wait. Weeks passed. Emily stayed in Connecticut. Julian visited twice a week, for supervised hours at first. Storybooks and playgrounds and tea parties in plastic cups. Lily clung to him more each time. By week 5, she called him Daddy without prompting. And it undid him completely. Julian bought her a tiny locket with their initials. He didn't buy her a pony, or a car, or a trust fund. Just time. And that was what mattered. But love? That was another matter. Emily was careful, grateful, but distant. She didn't meet his gaze the way she used to, didn't stand close, didn't let herself believe again. Until the night Lily fell sick. And Julian drove 3 hours in the rain. To hold her hand. To sing her lullabies. He didn't know he remembered. To kiss her forehead and stay the night on the floor of the farmhouse kitchen. Emily watched from the doorway that night, silent, shaking, because it wasn't a grand gesture. It was something harder. Consistency. 1 month after the separation, she found him in the city, at the same cafe, wearing the... I stood quickly. I wasn't sure if you'd come. Emily took a deep breath. I hated you, she said, For a long time, for being rich, for being unreachable, for making me fall for you in one night and then disappearing. Julian's eyes softened. You never left my head. She stepped closer. You came back. You didn't speak? You showed up. You stayed. You changed. Still silent. And then she added, in a voice that trembled, I think I still love you, but I'm scared. She nodded, eyes shining. Oh, am I? And this time, she didn't walk away.
Chapter 8. The Fire That Brought Us Back. The sirens shattered the silence before dawn. Emily jolted awake in her aunt's guest room, the sky outside barely touched by morning light. For a second she thought she'd dreamt it, until her phone vibrated violently on the nightstand. Julian. She sat up fast, heart in her throat. Emily, it's me. I'm okay. Lily's okay. But something's happened at Whitestone Tower. A fire. Deliberate. Security breach. I think someone's trying to destroy evidence related to my father's offshore files. Now. Shit, know who else to call. Emily, we was already pulling on jeans. Where are you? Midtown East, 22nd floor. They locked the elevators. I need help. Then the line went dead. 30 minutes later, Midtown. Smoke twisted above the skyline as Emily pushed through barricades, flashing Lily's photo and whispering Julian's name to anyone who'd listen. Chaos spilled into the street. Firefighters shouted codes over radios. Reporters gathered like vultures. Ma'am, this area's He's still inside, she snapped. Julian Blake, Whitestone CEO. He's not answer. He called me from the 22nd floor. A firefighter looked up sharply. Room 2214 was flagged for investigation. The fire started near there. Emily's breath caught. Can you get to him? We're trying. The fire was unstable. Sprinklers failed on the upper floors. Emily didn't wait for permission. Inside 22nd floor Whitestone Tower. Julian's suit jacket was slung over the chair. He crouched behind a thick glass desk, smoke pouring in through the hallway. The doorframe was blistering, heat pressed like a hand around his throat. He had one arm around a locked file case, and the other shielding a woman. His ex-fiancée. Trapped in the building by sheer bad luck, she'd been in the executive suite finalizing her exit paperwork when the alarms blared. Julie Coffee, she coughed. You should have left me. Not how I'm wired. They heard the stairwell collapse 2 floors down. The backup system wasn't responding. Julian wasn't afraid of fire. But he was afraid he wouldn't get the chance to see his daughter again. To tell Emily the whole truth. He hit the emergency panel again. Nothing. Downstairs, fire command post. She going up? The captain shouted. The woman, Emily Hart, she'd just slipped past the 3rd floor, heading toward the executive level. Jesus. Does she have a death wish? 10 minutes later, Kunkin. Emily's lungs screamed as she climbed over twisted beams and broken tile. The corridor was black with smoke. She wrapped a scarf around her mouth and pressed forward, calling his name. Then his voice, rough but a lot. Emily, get out. You shouldn't be here. He found him in the corner office, shielding Stella with his coat. One look at Emily covered in ash, eyes blazing, and he froze. I told you to stay safe. And two, they told Grappa about it's up. She reached into the emergency wall panel, yanked a secondary oxygen mask and shoved it into his hands. Put it on, we're leaving now. The stair. The 3 of them moved fast, Emily leading with the flashlight app on her phone, Julian supporting Stella, who limped with a twisted ankle. Debris cracked beneath them, smoke coiled around their legs. A ceiling panel dropped inches from Emily's head. Julian yanked her back just in time. You're insane, he breathed. Probably, she said, but I wasn't going to let Lily grow up without you. He stopped. Say that again. Emily turned, coughing. We can argue later. No, Julian said, pulling her against him. Say it again. He met his eyes. She need you. Julian's voice broke. So do he hesitated and then nodded. So do I. 30 minutes later, he outside the The building behind them burned like a fallen kingdom. Emily leaned against the ambulance, blanket around his shoulders, hair matted with soot. Stella had been taken to a nearby hospital, but Julian stayed with Emily. "You saved me," he said, handing her a water bottle. "You called me first." "I didn't even think," he admitted. Your number was the first thing my brain reached for. Guess your subconscious is smarter than your ego." Julian laughed. A medic approached. "You two have someone waiting, says she's 4 and furious." Emily turned and there she was, running through the crowd like a comet, straight into her mother's arms. "Mommy." Emily scooped her up, burying her face in her curls. Then Lily turned to Julian. "You're okay," she said, small and brave. Julian crouched in front of her. "Thanks to your mom." Louis looked at both of them. "Can you come home now?" Julian glanced at Emily. She nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "I can." That night, Emily's apartment. The three of them sat around the kitchen table, eating pizza from paper plates, the air thick with exhaustion and unspoken things. Julian looked around the tiny room. "I've never been so glad to be anywhere in my life." Emily stared at him. "What was in that file you carried out?" He hesitated. "Of what?" "Your father wasn't who I thought he was. Offshore accounts. Dirty money. A woman's name in the file. Joanna Whitman." Emily froze. "My mother," she said. Julian nodded. "Your mom tried to stop him. He blamed her. Buried the truth." Emily felt tears sting her eyes. All this time she thought no one believed her. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "I believe her now. I believe you. And if you'll let me—" Emily stared at their hands, at Lily drawing with crayons beside them, at the man she'd once married for a night, and at the family they were somehow becoming. "Then let's start here," she said quietly. "Together." Julian smiled. For once, it wasn't guarded. Chapter 9. What We Choose Now. Rain tapped softly on the windows of Julian's Manhattan penthouse. The chaos had settled. The media frenzy around the fire at Whitestone Tower had shifted to speculation and scandal. But in this space, warm and quiet, the only thing that mattered was what Julian had been waiting 6 years to do. Tell the truth. "Start wherever you want," Emily said gently, her fingers curled around a mug of mint tea. She sat on the opposite end of the couch, legs tucked under her, her presence steady now, like she wasn't running anymore. Julian, "My father was 2 different men," he said. "To the world he was a titan, sharp, driven, brilliant. But privately, he was reckless, obsessed with legacy." Emily nodded slowly. "I figured as much. When I found my mother's name in your company's blacklisted files." Julian looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. He framed her. She'd discovered irregularities in the company's international division. Offshore funds, false audits, shell corporations. He fired her before the board ever found out. She went quietly. "He had no choice," Emily whispered. "I know," he said. "I didn't back then. I was 24, ambitious, desperate to prove I was different from him, yet so tangled in his approval, I couldn't see what he'd done. And now I've seen the files, read the memos. My father built Whitestone on a foundation of greed, and when it started to crack, he buried the truth beneath people like your mother." Emily set the mug down carefully. "And you?" Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I want to dig it up, expose it, make amends however I can. Not for PR, not for headlines. For you. For Lily. For the little girl who asked if I could come home." Emily blinked hard. "I never wanted your money," she said softly. "I never even wanted your name. I just wanted my daughter to have a father who showed up." Julian looked her dead in the eye. "Then let me be that man." The next morning, Whitestone legal conference room. Julian placed a thick folder on the glass table. Inside, the contents of the file he'd saved from the fire. Bank statements, emails, evidence of years of financial misdeeds stretching across continents and across generations. The legal team stared, stunned. "You're exposing your father's crimes?" one attorney asked. "The fallout could collapse the company." Julian nodded. "If the foundation's rotten, it deserves to fall." "And what about the board?" "We'll face them. But the truth doesn't wait for a convenient time." Emily stood behind him, hands steady. The attorney looked at her. "You support this?" He nodded. "My mother died believing no one believed her. That ends today." 2 days later, Board of Directors emergency session. Julian stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Emily beside him. Lily, waiting outside with George. He is most loyal and now trusted COO. "I won't waste your time," Julian said. "You've all heard the rumors. I'm here to confirm them." He handed out copies of the file. The room was silent as pages turned, the weight of decades hitting each man and woman like bricks. Resigning as CEO effective immediately. Heads shot up. One guitar gossip. "I'll remain on the board," Julian said, calm but resolute. "But Emily Whitman Hart will take my place as interim CEO until we restructure fully. She's the one who uncovered the first error. She's the one who saved the Liang Long deal. She's the one who saved our company. Twice." Emily froze. "Relinquite," she whispered. He turned to her, voice soft. "You're not a contract wife anymore. You're the future of this company." "But you earned this." He looked around the table, disbelief on every face. And then, one by one, they nodded. "Approved. Power." That night, on the balcony of Whitestone Tower, Emily stepped out into the cool spring air, her heels clicking softly on the stone. Julian followed a few steps behind. "Still standing?" he asked. Barely she breathed. He offered her a glass of champagne. He raised an eyebrow. "Are we celebrating or surviving?" He smiled. "Both." They stood in silence, watching the city pulse with light. "You gave it all up," she said finally. "Everything you built." "I didn't build anything worth keeping," he said. "Not until you—" Emily turned slowly, her heart pounding. He stepped closer. "I loved you the night you married me. I just didn't know what love was yet. I thought it was control, performance, power. And now—" He took her hand. "Now I know love is letting someone see all your broken pieces, and not running." She didn't pull away. "Julian," she whispered, "this time, if we do this, it's not for a contract, not for appearances, not for our daughter. It has to be for us." He nodded, his voice thick. "It always was." And then, as the wind picked up and the city danced below them, she leaned into him. Because she needed saving. It was quickly she was finally ready to be chosen. 3 weeks later, a quiet family day. Lily ran barefoot through the grass at Riverside Park, bubbles trailing behind her like shooting stars. Julian chased her, laughing, a man reborn. Emily sat on the blanket with a book in her lap, but she wasn't reading. He was watching her. The man who once shattered her trust was now the one rebuilding it, brick by brick, day by day. He returned with Lily in his arms. "She wants to go to the zoo," he said. "Tomorrow. The elephants." Emily smiled. She's always liked the quiet ones, the ones with sad eyes. Julian sat beside her. "She's her mother's daughter." They were silent a moment. Then Emily looked at him. "You sure you're ready for a life that doesn't come with boardroom suits and helicopter escapes?" Julian smiled. "I've had all the power in the world, but this," he took her hand, "this is the first time I've felt peace." And Emily, he wasn't rebuilding her life alone anymore. They were doing it together. One hard-earned truth at a time. Chapter 10. The Wedding They Chose. The sky over Manhattan was gold and gray, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or shine. Emily Hart, now CEO of Whitestone Enterprises, stood alone in the garden courtyard of the Whitestone Foundation building. Behind her, guests arrived one by one. Investors, board members, journalists, a few friends from a past life, all waiting for a charity gala, and, unknowingly, something more. Emily's fingers trembled around a folded letter. It was addressed to Julie Kimmins's handwriting, delivered by a courier that morning, with a single white lily attached. She hadn't opened it yet. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was afraid of what it might change. They had come so far, but not far enough to call it healed. Got you. 2 hours earlier, a quiet apartment up top. Julian stood at the window of his temporary apartment, a modest space, rented by choice after stepping away from the penthouse life. He no longer wore power like armor. Now he wore purpose like a scar. Across the room, Lily helped tie his... "You look like a magician," she giggled. Julian smiled. "Let's hope I can pull off the trick I'm about to try." "Are you going to marry Mommy again?" Julian blinked, caught off guard. "What do you ask that?" "Because she looks at you like the story isn't over yet," Lily said. Then she ran off to find her sparkly shoes. Julian stared after her. In the mouths of children, be back in the courtyard. Kralinka. Emily finally opened the letter. "Emily, 6 years ago, I asked you to marry me without ever asking who you were, and still you gave me a piece of your heart. One night, one vow, one life growing inside you that I never had the honor to know, until now. I didn't deserve your forgiveness then, maybe I still don't, but I've learned something. Love doesn't come with guarantees, it only asks that you show up. So today I'm showing up. Because I need to fix us. But because I want to choose us. Will it come find me where we started?" Emily closed her eyes. A gust of spring wind lifted the petals on the centerpiece beside her. Somewhere across the city a string quartet was warming up. And somewhere else, he was waiting. 30 minutes later, Midtown Chapel off Fifth Avenue. The chapel was nearly empty. Just him. Julian stood alone in the front pew, hands clasped, breath shallow. No tuxedo, no tie, just a dark blue suit, and a heart open enough to be broken again. He didn't hear her come in, but he felt it. A shift in the air. The gravity of her presence. He turned slowly. Emily stood at the entrance, wearing a pale champagne dress, not a wedding gown but something softer. Grubber. He walked toward him, each step echoing like a drumbeat. "You remembered," she said. "This is where we signed the papers," he replied. "Back then it meant freedom, escape, strategy." He took a breath. "Now it means home." He looked down at her hands. "I don't want promises you can't keep, Julian. I didn't want to keep any that aren't made to goers." Then she said, "What if I say no?" "Then I'll stay right here," he whispered, "until you say yes, or until my heart gives out." Emily almost laughed. He almost cried. "You don't even have a ring this time," she said. Julian smiled. "I was hoping we'd pick it together." That even Gaia Yvonne White stood over. The crowd was gathered, cameras flashing, strings playing softly. Emily and Julian stepped onto the stage. Together. No wedding announcement, no drama. Just two people, leaders, parents, partners, who had survived everything that nearly broke them. "Tonight," Emily began, "isn't just about charity. It's about legacy, about rewriting the stories we were given." She glanced at Julian. "And sometimes it's about starting again, not as strangers, not as mistakes, but as something braver." Julian added, "We've built an empire on broken foundations, but now we're building something else, something real, together." The applause that followed wasn't for a business deal. It was for a love that had bled, burned, and come back to life. 1 week later, Guru Central Park. The ceremony was private. First time, Emily in a soft ivory dress. Julian in linen and light. Lily walked between them holding both their hands. This time there were no contract, no photographers, no fire to escape. There's thous. the sacred trembling peace of starting again. Julian's vows. I loved you before I knew what love meant, and I failed to because I didn't understand it. But I've spent every day since trying to become a man worthy of you. And I will spend every day after proving that love doesn't have to be perfect to be forever. Emily's vows. I hated you once, feared you once, but I never stopped carrying you. In the words I didn't, you weren't just my past. You're the part of me I didn't know how to heal until I let you in again. And me also did. The kiss was soft. And not because they were beginning again, but because finally they weren't pretending anymore. They were everything they'd fought to be. Again, conclusion. A love that stayed. They say some love stories are written in ink and others are written in fire. But the greatest ones? They're carved into the quiet places, the spaces between silence and survival, the cracks people don't see, and the choice to fill them anyway. Emily never planned on marrying a billionaire. She never planned to raise a daughter alone. She never imagined that a one-day marriage born of desperation and disguise would become the very thing that reshaped her identity. But maybe that's what love does. Not just the fairy tale kind, but the kind that's fought for, bled for, the kind that leaves scars, and still says, I'd choose you again. Julian Blake spent his whole life being someone, the man in charge. But it wasn't until he lost everything, his power, his pride, his peace, that he realized who he really was, and what he truly needed. Not another merger. Not another million. His trap. And the little girl with his eyes. Theirs was not a perfect love. There were secrets, mistakes, words left unsaid, a child hidden, a heart misunderstood. But in the end they chose to rebuild. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because when two people grow into who they were meant to be, separately, they can return to each other as equals, as partners, as a family. And that is the miracle. That love doesn't always arrive fully formed. Sometimes it begins in the wreckage. Sometimes it's born the moment we stop running. What this story taught us. If you've come this far, maybe this story wasn't just fiction for you. Maybe it reminded you of the parts of yourself you buried to survive. The parts that once believed in love, in second chances, in choosing yourself even when the world told you not to. Emily's story was never about being rich. It was about remembering. Julian's story, it was never about giving everything up. It was about letting go of everything that never really mattered. So what do we take away? 1. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the late-night calls, in the small sacrifices, in showing up when it's hard. 2. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over punishment. It means holding someone accountable, and still reaching out a hand. 3. You are allowed to start again. No matter the mistake, the regret, the time lost, redemption is never out of reach. And neither is healing. 4. You are not defined by the worst moment in your story. Emily wasn't just a scared girl with a baby. Julian wasn't just the cold man who walked away. They grew, and so can we. For every woman who's loved and lost. To the woman who raised her kids alone. To the one who loved someone who didn't love her back, until it was too late. To the one who gave up on romance because real life was too heavy. Your story too. You are not invisible. You are not broken. And you are not enough. Whether you're 50, 65, or 75, your best chapters can still be ahead of you. Because love doesn't have an age limit. Forgiveness doesn't expire. And hope, it never stops knocking. Final words from Emily. He used to think the bravest thing I ever did was walk away from Julian Blake. But the truth is, the bravest thing I did was walk back. Not because I needed saving, but because I finally believed I was worthy of being loved the right way. If this story touched you, please share. because we need the views, but because someone somewhere is standing at her own crossroads right now, holding a letter she's afraid to open, missing a daughter who doesn't call anymore, wondering if she'll ever be chosen again. Send this to her. Everyone deserves a second chance at love, marriage. Drop a comment below. Was there a line that hit home? A moment that made you cry? A truth you weren't ready to admit until now? We want to hear your story, because your story matters. Always has. Always will. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for believing. The Billionaire Love Stories team. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Hamptons in early. The last frost had vanished from the rose garden, and the ocean wind was softer now, like even the sea had learned to exhale. Emily stood on the porch of the coastal cottage Julian had renovated for them with his own hands. He'd gutted the place himself, painted every wall, replaced every creaking board, not because she asked him to, but because he needed a place that reflected who he was now. Not Julian Blake, CEO, but Julian Blake, husband, father, a man in progress. Emily smiled, watching through the window as Lily ran barefoot through the yard in her little white sundress, chasing fireflies in a mason jar. Inside, Julian was barefoot too, standing at the stove, apron on, brow furrowed in concentration as he flipped something that might have once been pancakes. He was terrible at it. She loved that about him. He turned when he caught her watching. What? Emily walked in, leaned her head against his shoulder. Nothing. You're staring. I do that sometimes when I'm happy. Julian set the pan down, turned to her. Emily looked up at him. No tension, no secrets, no distance. Just quiet joy. She whispered. He kissed her temple. Me too. Later that night, Lily's room. Julian tucked Lily into bed. Her voice was sleepy and small. Yeah, sweetheart. You and Mommy are married, right? He smiled. We are. But this time it's real. He brushed her hair back, nodded.
Out on the porch.
Emily sat under the stars with a journal in her lap. He flipped back through the pages, old letters, memories, fragments of grief and healing, and added a new entry at the end. Today, Lily told her teacher she wants to be an author, like me, and when the teacher asked what kind of stories she'd write, she said the kind where people get lost but find each other again. Maybe that's all we ever are, lost people finding our way back to the ones we were always meant to love. I think that's enough. Actually, I think that's everything. He closed the book, the stars above glinting like promises kept. Final image. Julian joins her on the porch. She leans into him. He wraps a blanket around them both.
And together, in a house built with new hands, on land far from the world that broke them.
They begin the rest of their lives.